AFA Today on AFR Talk. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us in the middle of your day here, taking a look at what is going on in the news world and trying to help you make sense of what it's all about. That's what we do every single day at this same time. My phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. So in Kansas, you had a bill last week that was put forward by the state legislature, and it was designed to protect people of religious conscience from being forced to do services for people who were engaged in sexual behavior that they didn't agree with. Now, how do we know what type of sexual behavior people are engaged in? Well, I'm not sure unless they somehow indicate it. You know, I don't go into my grocery store going, man, did I have good sex with my wife last night? It's just not the kind of you just don't hear normal people talk that way. But evidently in some places this is now the case. So the religious people, the faith-based people, the people that practice Judaism and Christianity and others in Kansas, they don't necessarily want to be dragged into ceremonies that celebrate sexual behavior that violates their conscience or their code of belief or their doctrine or their way of practice. So they're like, hey, in all these other states, they're being forced to engage in these celebrations anyway. We think that they're morally wrong. We shouldn't be forced to do this. So the legislature in Kansas, just trying to be responsive to its people, said, okay, we don't think that either. So let's see what we can do to get this protected for you. And in the House, it passed overwhelmingly, and then the Senate killed it dead. But over the weekend, Kirsten Powers, who recently, she's a contributor for Fox News, she just recently gave her testimony in Christianity Today. It was a big, big piece. I thought very interesting and telling story of how she came to faith. She's equating what these people are doing with Jim Crow laws. She talks about how similar bills have cropped up in a half dozen states. And then she goes, whether Christians have the legal right to discriminate should be a moot point because Christianity doesn't prohibit serving a gay couple getting married. Then she says, Jesus calls his followers to be servants to all. And she says, nor does the Bible call service to another an affirmation. She's basically saying, look, the Bible doesn't say, just because you disagree with these people for the way they are, that you should have the right to not serve them. And then she goes out and asks Adam Hamilton, pastor of the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection, largest church in Kansas, and he says, Jesus routinely healed, fed, and ministered to people whose personal lifestyle he disagreed with. This put Jesus at odds with religious leaders who believed they were sullied by associating with the wrong people. He suggested if this legislation were to pass, those who wish to refuse service to gay and lesbian people should be required to publicly post their policy. This would allow gay and lesbian people and all other patrons to know before entering a business. She said, he's right. Christians backing this bill are essentially arguing for homosexual Jim Crow laws. Then she says, evangelical pastor Andy Stanley leads North Point Ministries, the second largest church in the U.S. He told me, and this is a quote from Andy Stanley, son of Dr. Charles Stanley, it is offensive that Christians would leverage faith to support the Kansas law. Serving people we don't see eye to eye with is the essence of Christianity. Jesus died for a world with which he didn't see eye to eye. If a bakery doesn't want to sell its products to a gay couple, it's their business, literally, but leave Jesus out of it. In other words, Andy Stanley is indicating that a Christian-owned business that feels as though it violates their own conscience to participate in a gay wedding. And forget that, this bill was larger than just homosexuals. It didn't force you to participate in any kind of ceremony, any kind of activity based on sexual interaction that you didn't want to. So, for instance, if you were a shop owner and the state you lived in did not prevent or encouraged, allowed cousins to marry, and you found out when they came in and placed the order for their wedding cake or for their photography shoot that they were cousins, and you didn't believe that was morally appropriate, you could just say, you know what, I'm sorry, based on this, I can't do this. I'll refer you to someone who's okay with it, but I'm not free to enter into this relationship with you based on this on the way this is set up. Andy Stanley says that's not being like Christ. Andy Stanley says you are not serving, in essence, sinners who need the gospel by not baking their cake. In other words, Jesus would have baked the wedding cake for the gay guys. Do you agree? 888-589-8840. He went on to say, Christians serve unrepentant murderers through prison ministry, so why can't they provide services for same-sex marriages? Now, I'm sorry, that's Kristen Powers' quote, not Andy Stanley. She said, some claim it's because marriage is so sacred, but double standards abound. Christian bakers don't interrogate wedding clients to make sure their behavior comports with the Bible. Well, how do you know? If a brother and sister came in and said, we want to get married, and we don't care about anything else, we want you to do the cake, and you knew that they were brother and sister, and you had a moral objection to that, shouldn't you have a right to say, I'm sorry, I feel like I would be entering into this with you, and this just would violate what I believe? 888-589-8840. Let's go to line 3. John's calling from Michigan. Hi, John. Welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Well, I believe the stuff going on in Kansas is wrong, but everybody has their own way of living, what I think. But it's a sin. But what I was going to ask you is, why do you think that they shouldn't have a wage hike?
Why do I think what?
Why do you think they shouldn't have a wage hike?
Very simple, John, and thank you for the call. An artificially increased minimum wage will lead to greater unemployment. Game, set, match. End of discussion. Other people would like to argue with me about it. The CBO came out today and said at least 1 million jobs, 500,000 to 1 million jobs going to be lost if you force through the increase in the minimum wage. And my concern is, and they also said it's going to drastically affect the poorest of the poor by a greater percentage than anyone else. Well, I don't think that's necessary. Let's have more people working, not less. But I want to talk about the law in Kansas, because this, and specifically how Andy Stanley is saying that Jesus would basically say we should serve the people that we don't see eye to eye with versus not serving them. That Jesus might bake the wedding cake for the couple, the gay couple. Your thoughts on that? 888-589-8840. Let's go to line 1, Al in Texas. Hi, Al. Line 1, Al in Texas. Are you there? Let's go to line 2, Catherine calling from Virginia. Hi, Catherine. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Catherine in Virginia. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Kevin on the show.
Okay.
Go ahead and give me your thoughts.
Okay, yes, sir. Well, first of all, we were found a country that was founded on Judeo-Christian values. And to understand religion, when we can have a religion in anything that we want it to be, whether we have a religion in just anything, we need to be followers of Christ, and we should be following biblical values. Now, I am a business owner myself, and if I don't believe in something, I don't do it. But all the people know where I stand, and I think it's taking a stand and standing on it. I would not bake a cake for a gay couple who's going to get married. Now I will bake them a cake for anything else they like. But for something like that, no, I don't. I disagree with that.
And what's your rationale for it, Catherine? Do you feel like you're in some way affirming or engaging in the activity with them?
I don't believe in that, and my Bible says that gays, two of the same sex, are not to get married. So I can't celebrate that.
Okay.
Jesus would not celebrate that. Now, he would bake them a cake to go home and eat. That's fine. But for what they're celebrating, no. I'm not going to bake someone a cake to have an abortion. I'm not going to bake somebody a cake for a whole lot of things. I just don't do that, and I would not do that. And even if a friend of mine asked me to do that, I'm sorry, I can't do that, because my biblical values state that I am not, I love the sinner, I don't love the sin, and I am not going to promote that sin.
I think that's a very balanced view, Catherine. Thank you for the call. Let's go to line 4. David's calling from Arkansas. Hi, David.
Yeah. Got me in Arkansas?
Yep.
Okay. Couple of points. One, I'm glad it's... first, I thought you mentioned it was the son of Charles Stanley. I listened to Charles. He used to send me some materials that led to my salvation. So
right.
I think him and Andy are totally different on a lot of things, for one point. But what I was going to say is, let's look at it like this. Would we celebrate Adulterers Day? Like, they have this, and I don't even call them gays anymore, Kevin. To me, they are homosexual, and I've had some discussions. They should just come right out and say it. But we don't celebrate adulterers. Like, I've had a situation, one of my better friends was in an affair, and I talked to my associate pastor, and he told me he showed me in the Bible how we're supposed to approach that. That's what I did. Well, the friendship, the guy didn't want to hear what I had to say ultimately, and the friendship dissolved. So, But another point would be, and all this right now we're hearing with firearms, why can businesses not allow, even recently Starbucks was going to try to do it, not allow police officers into a Starbucks with their firearm, which they are supposed to carry for the public safety.
I'm not sure, and that's a different issue, David. I don't want to rabbit trail because there's too much to focus on in the story that we're dealing with. But thank you for the call, 888-589-8840. Here's my problem, and it's multiple fold. When you're talking about what Kirsten Powers is writing about, and I appreciate Kirsten. It takes great courage to be a vocal Democrat nowadays and to say that you're openly pro-life. She takes way more heat for her pro-life stance amongst her Democratic fellow pundits on the circuit than most Republicans do, than most pro-life independents do, because you're just not supposed to be pro-life in that world. And the fact that she is, I appreciate her testimony in Christianity Today, how she came to faith in Christ. Very, very powerful. I think she's thoroughly confused about Scripture on this one. And let me go back to why, okay? And this is important. This is really, really important. And I said this to her on Twitter this morning, but Jim Crow laws, she titled the article, Jim Crow Laws for Gays and Lesbians, ? Jim Crow laws were established to prevent service against people because of how they were born, okay? So in the South and in other places, Jim Crow those laws wanted to separate white people from black people primarily, and to say you could not eat, participate in life, do business, ride in the same way in public transportation, et cetera, as one another. And it gave preference to white people, and it gave dishonor to black people. That was the purpose. Jim Crow was designed to express systemized and institutional prejudice against black people for simply being born as a black person. She has fallen into a great trap with comparing the Jim Crow laws and what this law in Kansas is, because there's nothing similar about it. The Kansas law doesn't treat people based on the preference or based on the way that they are born. The Kansas law that says we're not going to imprison, we're not going to punish, we're not going to fine people of faith and people of religious conviction. We're not going to criminally punish them because they're discriminating against people based on any trait of birth. This doesn't give Christians the right to go discriminate against handicapped people or black people or Asian people or any people that are different than them. The Kansas law would say you do not have to serve people that are openly asking you to participate in something that would then violate your faith. So again, and it's not even limited to homosexuals. If you're in a state where cousins are allowed to get married and you have a thing against cousins getting married, you don't have to provide stuff for that. If you believe that no one that's ever been married should ever, even if their spouse leaves them, should ever have the right to remarry, and you knew that it was a divorced couple coming to get your wedding cake, you could decline service to them. One of the things she's arguing here is that people don't do that. How does she know? How does Kirsten Powers look into the mind of every baker, every photographer out there and go, I know exactly where your religious convictions lie? She's either being extremely arrogant or she's got a degree of insight I have not yet found in humanity. But the problem here is that she's equating the protection of religious liberties by everyday men and women to the same thing as institutionalized discrimination found in the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was based on birth and attributes of the person that was born. Nothing of this law targets people because of how they were born. It targets people of faith being allowed to protect their religious freedom. So again, it's in great error or in basic ignorance that she equates people who engage in certain forms of sexual behavior with those who were born with certain elements of DNA. And she muddies the whole point by doing that. Not only did you confuse the two, then you conned two men of faith into amalgamating the two as well. So Andy Stanley's talking about, he's talking about people that don't have any say in the matter. Adam Hamilton's talking about people who don't have any say in the matter. Does anybody believe that any act of sexuality ever is anything but a choice? 888-589-8840. One simple phrase from Jesus to someone who is involved in knowingly wrong behavior kills her premise, by the way. I will tell you what that one statement is, but he decimated Kirsten Powers' argument. Personally, Jesus did. I'll tell you what he said when we continue. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk. I'm Kevin McCullough. I'm so glad you're with us online at afatoday.com.